Monster Hunter is an amazing series that has been going on for a very long time now. And with that, it has had very memorable battles against some amazing different monsters. I mean, there's some fights that are just extremely historical, and some of us veterans will always remember till the day we die. But there is a specific fight that I think is one of Capcom's, if not their best one. And it might seem a little shocking to some of you, and I might get a little bit of hate, but it is for a specific reason. And it's not that because it's the coolest fight or necessarily even the most memorable fight, but it's because they did it so perfectly. And it is Nergigante. And yes, that is somewhat shocking because he is very basic. But there's a reason for it, and I think they knew this, and this is why they made Nergigante the way they did. As you know, Nergigante is the flagship monster, which means you have that history. Capcom is very good at making their flagship monsters very memorable. But like I said, this one specifically, I feel like is just a little extra. So part of what can make a monster and a fight in this game very good is the first impression. The cutscene and kind of how it laid out to you can affect overall how you like the monster. And in Monster Hunter World, Nergigante is right off the bat when you actually see him seen as very fierce and aggressive. I mean, he is known as the Elder Dragon that eats other Elder Dragons. And for an Elder Dragon his size, that's pretty impressive. So we already have this good impression of him that leaves us off on a good start, especially given the fact that this is a lot of hunters' first game. So they're getting a really good impression right off the bat, and this is where we had a lot of newcomers in, and I think it was a really good first step for some of them. I think might have what kept them going and doing this because I mean he does look really well, really good. He's very aesthetically pleasing. Now, of course, first impressions isn't everything. You can have a good first impression, but overall the fight and the monster just suck. One of the probably the biggest thing is the fight. And I feel like Nergigante, at least within the base game, not talking about the G-Ring version with Iceborne, Nergigante is both, I feel like, one of the hardest and the easiest monsters to fight. And here's why. So we start off with why he is hard. Nergigante is a brute. Just goes on sheer force. He hits hard, very hard. I remember my first time fighting against him. I struggled. I had to fight him a couple times. I really had to take a second and rearrange my build and come up with a good strategy to actually fight him. He wasn't just, I mean, at that point, some of the monsters you're fighting, it's not that hard. This one really makes you, it almost gives that older Monster Hunter feel of you're really actually struggling to fight this monster, and it's a good test of your skills. Granted, we did have other tests, such as Anjanat's kind of the first one of like, okay, this game is starting to actually get hard, and that's, I feel like, your very first ever test of like, this is kind of what the game's going to be like. But Nergigante especially was just very difficult. I mean, he hits very hard. His spikes go very far, and at first, his stuff. I mean, he seems unpredictable. He's fast. He doesn't fly much, but he has the dive bomb, which was kind of our first interaction with an Elder Dragon's like special move. And I feel like his was very well done because that thing will basically one shot you, but it's also really easy to avoid. And that gets into our next point of why he's easy. After you've killed Nergigante a couple times, you start to realize his pattern. Nergigante especially, he kind of reminds me of Raging, in which his attacks are very telegraphed. You kind of know what he's going to do, and if you know what he's going to do, it's very easy to counteract this. You even see this with the newer version of Ruiner Nergigante. It can be difficult at first, but once you know his moves, he becomes easier. He's also doesn't have, unlike some of the other Elder Dragons and stuff, he doesn't have a lot of these special moves. He's more of a brute. He hits you, he uses his spikes, he doesn't really fly, he doesn't, use fire or wind or godforsaken lightning. He just is pure strength. And while that makes him difficult in the fact that if you get hit, he might kill you pretty easily, it also makes it easy because there's not a lot he can do besides just basic hitting. With Teostra, he's putting blast areas all over and you have to dodge him. Kushaladora, you can't even get next to him because there's constant wind. And Kirin is just constantly sending lightning from the heavens down upon you. But with Nergigante, that isn't the case. And once you realize that and get good at that, he becomes very easy. For me and a lot of other people, it did not take long for him to start becoming, well, easy. And part of why that becomes so memorable is it, it sticks with you because of that change in how you fight him. It was such a good feeling when I killed Nergigante. You killed the flagship monster. It's really fun and it's really like, hell yeah, I did it. But there's something else to be said on when you start killing this monster that you kind of struggled with and you saw as difficult, when you start killing him very much easily and you start seeing his move patterns and you start killing him quickly and without getting hit much, and you might might even be from, you go from barely killing him to not fainting, a couple close calls but you still don't faint. That has a huge impact on how you feel as a hunter. I remember in Freedom Unite, I had the same way with Tigrex. He came in at the very start, knocked you off. You had that one mission with the Popo that he shows up and you're not ready for him, and then after a while you finally fight him. I remember fighting him for the first time and not doing very well, and then I started being able to fight him consistently and then killing him with relative ease. And that felt really good. It felt like a huge accomplishment being able to fight this tough brute easily. And you have that same effect with Nergigante. And it's a great way to get into the Elder Dragon aspect, because he is usually the first Elder Dragon. Most people don't go into option quests and fight Kirin before then. That just usually doesn't happen with the new players, because they're kind of wanting to get through the story. So it's really well built, and that's extremely memorable for the player. And even with not Runer, even with the Arch-Tempered Nergigante, I remember when he came out, I struggled. And yeah, I'm not a really good Monster Hunter player, but I'm decent. And I really, really struggled at killing him. And it wasn't that he had all these different moves that were just so hard to dodge and do. I mean, he had some really fast ones, but like his normal version, it didn't take very long to learn his move set. And then you start realizing you're dodging them and not getting hit as much. But he was so strong that when you did get hit, you basically died. I remembered I really made it my goal to try to kill him before the quest was no longer there. And that was probably one of the best feelings in that game in Monster Hunter World, was killing Ruiner Nergigante with just normal high rank gear by myself. I felt so amazing after that. And a lot of monsters have had an impact, but I don't think any of them were built like Nergigante was. He really was built to have an amazing impact on the players. And maybe for some of us veterans, it didn't have as much of an impact. I mean, to be honest, my first time hunting Rathian was probably more memorable than Nergigante, but that's because I was like 7 years old, and up until then, I fought basic monsters. I think the toughest monster I fought was like the Yin Ku, which really isn't that tough. But I was young, and hunting the Rathian, being able to cut off the tail for the first time was like just so amazing to me. And I saw this monster as this really tough monster that I killed. And later on, I started being able to kill the Rathian and Rathalos really easily, and that was just a hugely memorable thing to me. But you don't get that with every monster and with a lot of them, and not every Monster Hunter game has that. But Monster Hunter World did that with Nergigante, and I feel like every new player that started off on Monster Hunter World and played through to at least Nergigante had that huge major feeling of killing this monster, and you really see yourself progress as a hunter, because even with other monsters like the Anjanath or even Xeno'jiiva and all this stuff, it's like, yeah, you get better, but it just doesn't have that impact like it does Nergigante, just because of how much of a brute he really is. And it really shows the patterns, especially in the older games, of the patterns that each monster had. And I think that's when a lot of players really start realizing that their setup, that there is a setup pattern, and there's a way to improve via that way. And I think that's when they really start to peak. And I know that's when I peaked specifically with Monster Hunter World with the new setup, was right about the Nergigante time, was because you really start seeing it differently and you start seeing it that way. It's the Nergigante is very similar to the Raging experience that a lot of us older players had. Granted, it is still different, and it's just not the same. The Raging experience is just more memorable because of, I mean, there's nothing more memorable than seeing a monkey literally pick up the ground and toss it at you. But it's that same reason of he's this really just tough brute that doesn't have a lot of special moves. He just hits really hard, but then you start realizing the pattern. I mean, it did not take me that long to be able to consistently fight Raging because of how open his patterns were and how you could really see it. And Nergigante gives off that same type of chemistry and that same fight. And that is why I feel like Nergigante is one of, if not the best fights, because it is so memorable in that way. He's not too extreme and not too soft, but he gives off that satisfaction of making hunters really feel like they're actually a monster hunter. It's one of the best feelings to them, and really to anyone who plays Monster Hunter games, is once you reach that point of you're no longer this noob trying to just kind of smash buttons and hope for the best, that you're actually a monster hunter that is reading the monster and utilizing everything to your advantage to get better and actively kill these monsters. And it's just an amazing feeling. And to be honest, I I feel like this is the new Raging of the next generation of hunters that are starting to get into it. And I think that's really amazing personally, because it's such a good feeling. And the Nergigante fight is, yeah, a really good one. So that is why I think the Nergigante fight in Monster Hunter World is one of the best fights in the Monster Hunter series. Hey guys, thank you for sticking it through to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. This is my first video of actually doing like a commentary. I'm sorry for kind of rambling off towards the end. I did not have a script for this, like, at all. I was purely just talking and just thinking about it. So that's why some things may seem a little disconnected, and I might stutter a little bit or say or like or anything like that because, well, I'm new to this and I didn't have a script. So sometimes I stall a little bit to give me a better thought process. But yeah, leave a like if you enjoyed and consider subscribing. I will see you in the next video.